This podcast is not recommended for children. It contains coarse language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Sup, party people in the place to be, what it do? It's Boomer, Zoomer, and Doomer coming at you.
It's the Degenerates Podcast.
With the power of YouTube.
Episode 24.
Wow.
Yes.
The future episode.
Yes.
Whoa.
It's basically
With
Rick and Morty.
Boomer, Zoomer, Doomer.
That's right. I'm Boomer.
I'm Zoomer.
And I'm Doomer.
Wow.
And let's get right into the news.
Today we're talking about the future of communism.
Wow.
Wow.
So.
Well, you saying that you think communism might make a resurgence in the future? Like, do you have?
I mean, it's
like,
already
what do you
made
think
its
that-
resurgence. Like, it's already in the minds of so many people, so many misinformed youth and corrupted government officials. It's already there. It's already here.
Comrade Bernie.
Comrade Bernie, exactly.
So the thing that I was actually watching something the other day where they were saying, like, as wealth increases, like, as national wealth increases, the more likely it is that communism will work out.
Oh yeah, I've seen that too.
They
Yeah,
attribute the failure of communism in the past to the fact that the countries are too poor to actually spread out the wealth equally and have it be enough.
Okay, the thing is, when you do that, when you fucking do communism, anytime you do communism, you're not making wealth anymore. You're just distributing it.
Exactly. It's just stagnant, right? So that's why they're saying, like, as if there was another, so, like, you know how there's the poverty line?
Yeah.
For individual income? I think there's, like, they're talking about, like, a hypothetical communist line for national wealth. Like, once we hit a certain level of wealth as a nation, if you keep that within our borders, that communism would work out.
Dude, I mean, it happened in Star Trek, but that's a fucking TV show, not real life.
Are they communists in Star Trek?
It's like, money's never an issue. It's like nobody has money. It's
They
weird.
just give people shit.
Some shit like that. They have like credits or whatever the fuck.
Well, Star Trek is really far into the future, so maybe they predicted communism
Space commies.
back in the 70s. Yeah.
They predicted communism in the 70s.
Yeah.
The Soviet Empire is about to fall.
Mhm.
Hey guys, I think that some crazy people might do a thing where they share the wealth. Anyway, so I think that the question then is, like, would communism, like, is that just the reason that communism fails, because there isn't enough wealth in the country?
I think it's not even just that. I think communism's tied up with so many other things, because the wealth is in the hands of the government. Like, all the wealth in the world in that country is in the hands of the government. I don't think that the government can handle that kind of thing. I don't think that they're equipped.
The government will usually take more than getting, even though that goes against what communism teaches.
Exactly. And also, keep in mind just who are, like, communists and Marxists. So, the people who communism and Marxism is aimed at is, like, working class people. But these people are actually, like, you know, they're like Mr. Boomer here. They're, like, you know, steadfast in their traditions and all that cool stuff.
Exactly.
You know, they work hard, play hard, all that stuff. The actual people who like these ideas are, like, university and college students who don't know any better.
Elites, yeah. Which I've always found really strange, because you'd think that the higher you are in society, like, at least in an economical hierarchy, if you are a quote-unquote elite, that would be the last thing that you would ever want.
Mm-hmm. But
Because
the thing is, compared to everyone above you, you're so far down that you feel poor.
you think that's what the mentality is?
I think it is. Not like maybe not even like you just feel poor. It's like relatively everybody else has more money than you do.
Right. And you kind of convince yourself that I see what you're saying. So they're actually looking at it with a warped view, which is that, if you make $150,000 a year, you feel like you're in the bottom rung of society because there are millionaires about, when in reality you're in the top 10%.
Not even necessarily that. I don't think it's like... I think it's more like a... they just don't like the fact that other people have more money than they do.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that the other people actually worked like super hard, probably, to get it.
The thing that I've been noticing, since I guess the topic is mainly the future and not so much communism, but what I've been noticing is that there's been a lot of globalization efforts in the last 50 years. You can look at NATO, the UN, the European Union's a big one. The globalists are taking over, sort of thing. And it seems to me that they're actually just using communism as a driver for globalism and not the other way around. So, like in the communist Russia, it was the opposite, where globalism was like they wanted globalism because they thought that you could have communism over the whole world if they were all united under one banner. Whereas now it seems like people are driving communist ideals so that they can rule the whole world. What do you think about that?
Mate, that's possible. Possibly like a top-down kind of like influencing thing, fucking Illuminati bullshit, but yeah.
Well, it's not even so much a conspiratorial thing. Like, a lot of people, I think, are, like, normal, like, common people are on the side of globalism because they think of it as progress, as human progress.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that reflected in the foreign policy of a lot of countries. I mean, countries wouldn't be involved, like, there's civil wars in the Middle East. Why are Western countries involved in those? Well, it's because they want to have a hand in it. So, just to relate this back to the topic, I think that what the future more holds for us right now, the direction we're going in, is actually more globalism than it is communism.
Yeah, I think that it's moving towards globalism. That's something that I've thought for a little while. Even though a lot of people don't really like globalism because they like the individuality of their own country, and but I'm not sure if it would probably still be like America has all their different states and stuff. It might be, and they all have different laws and everything. It would probably be something like that, where we'd all still have the countries, but we just be we would have probably like one government though. We're like a federal government like with different levels of government in different places.
Like government Earth and down, like president.
Yeah, you could relate that to the European Union because they have the European Parliament, which is one big parliament for the whole European Union, obviously. And then they do have their individual countries still, but they're open borders between each other. It's actually crazy, like living in the New World. How that's worked out. Like, these are all countries with, if there was ever countries that could be nationalistic, it was European countries. They have more culture and history than anyone else. And even they have open borders between each other now. And they're all under one parliament. So, yeah, do you think that is the direction we're moving in then?
Could be something like that. I definitely think like with the advancement of technology and like we're going into space, it'll be like, oh shit, well now we need an Earth government, now we need a Mars government, now we need, all these other universes governments. It's just going to continuously become more abstract, up and up and up. Yeah.
That would be the direction. I had an interesting conversation on that too, because it does seem that was one of the main drivers for globalism before was space exploration, right? We're all going to unite as Earth and explore space, but we haven't even been to the moon, or at least a man hasn't been to the moon since, I think it's 76, the last mission.
But like, why would you send a man if you could send a robot?
Well, because isn't the point of globalization that we're going to colonize other planets and...
Yeah, but not the moon.
Yeah, we're trying to colonize Mars right now. That's what Elon Musk's working on.
That's what Elon Musk is working on, but he's not a government body.
Yeah, but he has a lot of money.
I'm just kind of wondering if maybe the future in my eyes, and maybe this is a good place just to start in general, it's just like, but the future in my eyes is that globalism is like the one constant between a lot of different philosophies for the last 100 years has been that the end goal is globalism, to rule over the world in one way or another. And that's what worries me. Like if the one constant was, say, space exploration, then I would believe that no matter what, we were going to explore space. But that doesn't seem to be so certain to me. What does seem to be certain to me is that we will be globalist, but it just seems like we'll have one big country and they won't be concerned about space exploration and all this. It just seems to be an economical thing. Like if you're in charge of the whole world, you now have the whole world's wealth. But before you guys respond to that, what do you guys think? Like if you think about the future 100 or 200 years from now, like what picture do you see in your head?
Oh, I see technology becoming integrated with us. So like in a very like no hands kind of situation. Like you use technology just with your brain. And then like a resurgence of psychedelic use. Because right now you see in Silicon Valley, everyone's fucking microdosing and everyone's super duper fucking productive now. You know, microdosing is really, really helpful for coding. And so I think we're going to see, you know, that's going to start in Silicon Valley and get out more and more and more until it just reaches everyone. Everyone who is kind of like, has that kind of mentality to psychedelics.
Yeah. What's the doomer outlook?
Yeah, doomer.
I tried microdosing, and I don't think it worked at all. I didn't feel anything, so I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, that's what microdosing is.
So, given that though, what do you think that the future will be like? Maybe 100 years, maybe just 50 years. When do you think we'll see a radical change where we can say this world is different from ours, and what will it look like?
World War III.
Oh wow, that's very doomer.
Do you think it's coming?
Who?
I don't think it will come right now or like within the next 10 years because if it were to come right now, then the whole world would be destroyed and nobody wants that. But it would have to be if governments were to like cut down on military spending, cut their budgets, and maybe the military, after a long time with no war, the military might not be, we might not put as much effort into the military, and then that might end up causing a war.
How so? Well,
if we don't have as good a military as all, if there's an imbalance between the militaries of the countries, then one country would be able to attack another country very easily, and it's just more likely that an attack would happen.
I totally agree. I was thinking about that myself. I was thinking about how a lot of neoliberal philosophy is anti-war. And you can even talk to some people and say, like, given your utopia, how do you account for war? They might say something like, well, we wouldn't need it. Like, if your philosophy is we don't need war or we don't need to be prepared for war, it is certain that you will be taken over in a war, right? What do you think about the future of, like, Western nations? Like Canada, for instance, the country we're in. We have... we have a small military right now, a standing force of 60,000 compared to the U.S.'s standing force of over 1 million. So that kind of factors into what you were saying.
As long as we stay good allies with the United States, and the United States keeps its military strong, then we would be fine. But if the United States were to turn on us for some reason, that would be very bad for us.
Well, not just that. It's almost like we are a state. given that, right? Because I think that the only thing that defines a country is its military power at the very end of it, because, like you said, if you can't defend the land that you claim, someone else will claim it. So do we really have a claim over this land, or are we just a secret state right now and we're just not really vocal about it? Most of our trade is with the states. We have free trade agreements with them.
I think that we are still independent from the United States in certain ways, like culturally and with our laws as well. You know.
Well, it just seems to me like we're California.
A very cold California.
Yeah, like we have the same socialist policies. The only difference is that we have less people. This whole country has less people than California by about 20 million.
Oh, shit. What the fuck?
Yeah, there's not a lot of people in Canada. And the majority of us live like 100 kilometers from the border, like 50% of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to... I like being Canadian, though. I don't want to be American.
I wonder if, because like you said, there's been a rise of socialist and communist ideologies, but there's also been, or at least the media likes to say, that there's also been a rise in nationalist policies, right? Or nationalist ideals, which aren't inherently bad, but they are nationalist, right? It's basically saying, if you're a nationalist in Canada, you are like, basically, let's close our borders, this country first, stop sending foreign aid, all that. Do you think that's just like a futile response to everything we just described, or do you think that has a real chance of actually taking hold in the future?
Definitely has a real chance of taking hold in the future. I don't think we can discredit or discount it right now, because it's definitely, I think it's even, it might not be the majority, but it's definitely a big part of a lot of people, because a lot of people aren't very liberal, a lot of people are conservative. And while some conservatives might really want this globalism thing to happen because of trade and things like that, and business and economics, it might also be just as beneficial to have independent countries and to focus on your own country, build it up, and then maybe try to globalize afterwards. Because if we have all these strong countries building themselves up and then become globalist, I think that'd be a lot better than doing it like right now.
But you think that we should become globalist at some point?
I think that globalism is a separate thing that it's hard to explain. I think that globalism is like a fundamental human desire to like return to the ooze. Like, it's really weird.
Like entropy. I think I know what you mean.
Like that. Yeah.
I think I know what you mean almost exactly.
Something along those lines.
But
I think psychedelics are going to be like a catalyst for that.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me like the question really here is that the nationalist ideals are obviously very specific to the people in that nation. So Canadian ideals can be different from American ideals, which are definitely different from African ideals of any African country, right? Mm-hmm. But then the argument, like what globalism is proposing, is to dispense with nationalist ideals. So whatever you think being a Canadian is, whatever you think that is like just completely get rid of that idea and instead focus on what being a human is. But I wonder if that would ever actually work.
Yeah, I don't think it'll definitely reach all the way down, like to the people. Because this is a lot of like government shit. A lot of people don't really even pay attention to politics.
Yeah,
or
and
that.
we need to have a lot of checks and balances just to make sure that like the government at the top didn't have complete control over everything. Yeah, just without any.
That's probably one of the biggest issues. It's just not letting the government get too much control.
That's the thing, right? That's the concern, I think, with people who do pay attention. Anything that's globalist is like inherently bad because for instance, conservatives are in favor of small government, right? Like you have in our country, the province of Alberta has a big seceding movement right now where they want to be their own country. So I think that in terms of the future, maybe globalism might happen in a few centuries, but I think that in this next century, at least given the trends in this country, and then you have, England exiting the EU, Scotland is independent from England, Ireland is independent from England. It seems to me like everyone's breaking up into smaller countries.
Yeah, going back to groups, smaller. Yeah. Maybe that is kind of like what's happening. Maybe we're not advancing. Maybe we're returning.
Yeah, I could see that. What about culturally? Where do you guys think that... because you can argue that...
It's almost impossible to say what's going to happen with culture. Because culture is fucking weird.
Well, given the trends, like you could say, and people do say that we've lost a lot of culture, right? Mm-hmm. And just to use this country because it's the one I know best, like, you could definitely say, if you think back, and maybe I could give you some examples if you like, but that we've lost a lot of tradition and culture that used to make this country unique, and now we're just kind of not this country. Like, because the two things that make a country are military power and culture. Our military power is almost non-existent, and our culture is almost non-existent now as well, it seems to me. But what do you guys think about that?
It does seem like modern man is kind of lost. I don't know. I'll need some time to think about that. What do you think, Tony? Or Doomer?
I think that in the I think that culture. I'm not exactly sure how it can be lost. I just think that it changes from what it used to, unless like you're talking about like a culture like with traditions, and then the culture, when it changes, the old culture is gone, and then it's just a new culture, and you're talking about how the old culture is gone now.
Because what I've noticed is that things just tend to be getting faster and faster and faster. There's no way that we can keep up. So like we'll crack jokes and shit, but jokes will be like in the news, like not more than like a few weeks ago. Like Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, or some shit like that, or did kill himself. I can't remember which one's funny, but yeah.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
Yeah, that one's funny.
Well, we've talked about it. Oh, I see what you're saying, though. Why you can't tell which one's funnier. Yeah. But how would you describe modern Western culture? Because I think that that's probably a good marker for thinking about how things will turn out, is getting a good grapple on how things are. And I don't know if we even really do. So
deteriorating is the first word that comes to my mind.
Right.
I think that Canada and the United States culture is almost the same now. Mm-hmm. I think it's almost like our culture has been taken over by the United States, I guess.
Or it's like we're dropping down again into subcultures and subgroups.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think subgroups actually makes a lot more sense now that I think about it. Because it's like people just choose maybe not necessarily choose, but they are part of a group. I don't like that. That sounded very postmodern-y.
Yeah, it did.
Well,
it might be right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like, because everyone's saying that we're devolving into tribalism. And I think that's kind of right. Because people are becoming more steadfast in their, base decisions, that they don't challenge their thinking. And also, someone sent me a video of two, actual politicians talking, and they're supposed to actually, have a debate, but instead one just throws a water ball at the other, and then they fucking fight. Yeah, it's like Pakistan. It's like in Pakistan or Palestine, I think.
Oh, if it was Palestine, that would make sense, because the Palestine and
Israel.
I almost said the Jew place, but yeah.
The Jew place.
What do you guys? Here's a contentious question for you. First of all, do you guys know anything about that situation?
No.
So essentially, this is how I understand it. Israel obviously was a nation for a very long time, and their borders have stayed relatively the same. But if you didn't know, Israel wasn't a nation for a while there, and I forget which war it was after, but there was some war that happened, and basically, like, the United States and some other Western countries said, here you go, Israel, you're back, like, here are your borders. And Palestine was the country that was occupying those lands at the time, and now, so if you can try and picture, the border of Israel is basically on the coast, and it's not very big, but it's just different, like, they've taken what the borders of Israel should be and broken it up in between Palestine and Israel, and nothing's connected, and it just looks like polka dots. It's actually quite funny when you think about it. And they're at war. Like, Israel wants to have Israel, and Palestine wants to have Israel. So, like, do you guys have a side on that at all?
I like Jews, but I also like the Middle East. So,
you like the Middle East?
I mean, I know a guy from the Middle East. I like. Yeah, it's just interesting to hear about. But I do think that Israel's, if anyone is going to ever receive foreign aid, like, if I had to choose who to give foreign aid to, I'd be like, okay, well, I have a more personal connection to the Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be like,
and
yeah.
It's interesting because this is also a bipartisan issue where people on the left support Palestine and people on the right tend to support Israel.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
How? So
and they call it in the States, the left-leaning politicians, they call it the occupation of Palestine. That's what they call Israel.
Oh, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Dude, until we learn how to actually speak properly and communicate effectively, shit's just gonna keep going down.
Well, that's the thing. So here's some ultra boomer. This is like before boomer. It's
Gen
not
X.
that we didn't learn way before it, but it's not that we didn't learn to speak properly. It's that we've totally forgotten. I almost like, because this goes back to the globalism thing, but under the British Empire, we seem to be a lot more civilized. Like, a lot more civilized in our country. In terms of what the British military was doing in places like Africa, maybe not so much. That wasn't so awesome. A lot of genocidal tendencies there. But in terms of, like, in this country, in England itself, you would have two politicians. I even watched, well, I'll stick on this for a second, but you could have two politicians on separate sides of the aisle disagreeing with each other vehemently, but at least having a conversation, whereas now it's just two ideologies speaking at the same time, and there's no purpose to it at all other than just to recruit more members.
Yeah.
So it seems to me like we've actually forgotten something. Like, your diagnosis of Western culture deteriorating not only makes sense to me, it also seems that this has been long in the making, and after the British Empire started deteriorating, that seems to me to be when our Western culture really started going downhill, because to be a part of the British Empire, you did have a unifying narrative. Everyone was a subordinate to the Queen, and if you were a good Englishman, you were, like, you wanted to progress in the name of the king and country and all this. It was also deeply religious and Christian. And it seems to me that actually those were the things, when we had those ideals, those top ideals, king, country, and God, that's when these little things like debate and disagreements, like, we could actually have those, because at the end of the day, we all believed in those three things. King, country, and God.
So it's some common ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Basically, it sounds to me like they just had a few fundamental presuppositions, and then that actually helped them further their, like, culture and ability to speak to each other and things like that, as long as they agreed on a few basic things.
Because I think the problem with postmodernism is that, how is it described? That there's a infinite amount of, like, viewpoints or
interpretations
of the world. and none of them are correct. Like, there's no one that's correct. And that's actually the problem, because once you say that, like, you can accept that idea, or you can try to, but all that does is make you go to the next level. So before, we all agreed on God, King, and Country, and then we could have our political debates. Well, now we can't agree on God, King, or Country, and so now our political debates have taken up those things, and that's why it's become somewhat of an ideology instead of an actual debate over ideas of what's best for our country's future, because it's more like, who do you pledge allegiance to, the right or the left? And then that's who you pledged allegiance to, and that's who you believe in.
Yeah. What does
Makes it tough for something like globalism to happen.
Yeah. What does Doomer think about all this? Doomer, care to weigh in?
There's a lot there. I think that there's a lot of yeah, I'm just trying to think of which thing to talk about.
Maybe I could put it a bit more succinctly, because I think I'm talking about just one main thing.
Okay.
So I can maybe track this mindset all the way back to Rome, I think, where they had a democracy for a little while and then they had dictators. But even when they had their democracy, whenever you did something, if it wasn't directly for you, it was for Rome, right? If you did something under the British Empire, it was for the British Empire and maybe God as well, right? Mm-hmm. Nowadays, when you do something, you can't, like, people don't say, I'm doing this for Canada. It's either I'm doing this for me or I'm not doing it at all. I think that's why I'm saying that a unifying narrative is important, because I don't think that you can really take action, that you can make yourself take any meaningful action if it's... Does that make sense?
And that mindset is kind of going against globalism as well. It's kind of the opposite.
But I think that globalism can still happen. It's more like a divide and conquer thing at that point than it is a unifying thing.
The entire human race divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we should always have something that helps us to work together instead of just working for ourselves.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think you can work for yourself a lot better when you have one unifying narrative. And I think that we really hit the peak of that in the British Empire because, like I said, you had God, King, and Country, right? So you're unified under Christianity, under God, but you were also unified under your monarchy, right? Those were two big things that, like, if you had a horrible political disagreement with someone, no matter what your disagreement, you believed in those two things at the end of the day, and that allowed you to have a conversation because you knew that person wasn't like someone that wanted to tear down your society. And nowadays, since we don't have those top things to believe in, if you have a political disagreement with someone, it does feel like they want to tear down your society because that's all you have left to believe in.
Oh, so if they disagree with you, then you might think that what your beliefs are like what will keep society going, and if attacking them, then
exactly.
Any Interesting. A unifying narrative is definitely one of the most important things for any society, for any gamer society.
And so it almost seems to me then like the thing to do would be to restore a monarchy and restore faith in Christianity, and that would help things along.
See, I don't know how. Like, I think we're at the end of something. I don't think that we can necessarily create all of that again in a modern context. Because how would we put up a monarchy and make people believe in God when they're, plugged into machines and constantly ejaculating or whatever the fuck we're gonna do in the future.
Well, see, that is the thing. But I used to feel that same way, that we're at the end of something, and it's hard to say what that something is. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. Something with these newer generations, I hate to bring it up because it's so cliched, but like the No Nut November thing, that's a pretty new thing, and the whole philosophy behind it is internet porn is really bad for you, and you should stop jacking off, right? But the reason that you should abstain from those things is because it's a instantaneous gratification, right? So just the fact that philosophy has somehow birthed itself in the last few years gives me a lot of hope that type of thinking is how you start to rebuild these other things.
Yeah. And now, since we have history, we'll be able to record what exactly it was that was the catalyst for change and fixing what we fucked.
Exactly.
Up. So I think that's pretty cool. So if we do manage to fix it, then we can, tell future generations about it. Or maybe the problem is history itself.
Yeah, maybe we should get rid of history.
Maybe.
Are you serious? Is that what you're?
It's a possibility. There have been theories about it. Yeah, Terence McKenna is one of the biggest proponents of that theory.
If we completely got rid of history, then we wouldn't be such pussies about doing everything, because we wouldn't even know what would happen. We wouldn't know about the bad things that could possibly happen. We just fucking go for it and do it.
That's a super interesting idea. It's dumb, but it's super interesting. Because you're totally right in that you can't propose any political philosophy without someone saying, well, in the last 100 years, this country just did it and fucking someone got shot. So that's actually really interesting. Obviously, so the mainstream argument against that is if you forget your history, it's doomed to repeat itself.
Yeah.
However, I wonder how true that is. Because it's not a very deep statement, really. You can't repeat history. No two communist regimes are the same, although they tend to fail. So, but is that what you meant as well, Zoomer? That we should get rid of history?
I'm not saying I am saying the idea of history that we have. Maybe instead of this kind of long written literary history, we have instead a cultural history. And because that's what happened a lot of times. A lot of times people are like, okay, this is how we were created. This is what our gods do. This is this is the knowledge passed down from our ancestors. It's very tribalistic, but maybe that's the direction we're headed in.
And I think that something that's discounted a lot is spiritualism. It's a word that's been dragged through the mud and no one really knows what it means anymore, but it seems to me that because that description of history would go in a very spiritualistic direction.
Yes. That's what I think mushrooms are bringing back, or psychedelics in general.
Yeah.
Because it's not even necessarily that psychedelics make you spiritual, it's that they dissolve barriers.
Right. But then in the end, that the end result of that is to make you spiritual, you would say.
Something like that, yes.
So, the flaw with spiritualism, as we've seen through history, is that it doesn't always come to the right conclusions, and it can end up in people dying.
Yeah, and there's also no evidence for it.
Well, that's the thing.
No evidence that would satisfy our rational mind. Not minds, but a rational population, I guess. Because we're not very rational.
Yeah.
But together...
But that might be what is dissolving, I think, is actually our sense of spiritualism, because to have king and truly believe in a king is actually, I think, a deeply spiritualistic thing.
Yeah.
And same with God. And more than that, I think that spiritualism is kind of like a shortcut to living by nature's laws, or at least in harmony with them. It seems to me that spiritualism is kind of delving into yourself, saying, how do humans work? I had an interesting conversation where I was talking about evolution, a very unspiritual thing. And it was about religion as well. We were talking about how Christianity would say, like, God created man, right? Mm-hmm. And how that's wrong and stupid. And, well, what I said is, evolutionary history is all well and good, but it dates so far back that you might as well believe that God created man, because our nature's instincts, everything intrinsic to us, you won't see that change for how many thousands or millions of years, right? Like the beings that we are today, it's more useful to believe that we were created by God than we are always changing, because although we might be always changing, it's at such a minimal level that it's not really useful to believe.
That doesn't follow what it says in the Bible, though.
What do you mean?
In the Bible, it says that the Earth's like 6,000.
Well, it doesn't say that in the Bible, eh? That's just from biblical historians who have taken all the ages of all the people in the Bible and added them up together.
Well, yeah, but that's how old the Bible. Like, if you could,
because it goes back to the Adam and Eve,
all the way to Jesus, born in the year 0, then you'd be able to know how old the Bible says the Earth is.
Yeah, but the thing is, so this is why I don't like that argument either, is that the Bible doesn't explicitly make a claim as to how old the Earth is. It's the Bible tells you how old different biblical figures are.
Also, they're really fucking old. So
they get so
you
old.
Can't. I don't. Yeah, I think it's like the Bible's more of a metaphor than anything else.
Exactly, it is a myth, right? And a myth isn't a fiction; it's different. So I don't like it when that seems to be one of the things that has degraded spiritualism, is taking a deeply spiritual text like the Bible and then imposing this scientific reason on it and saying, well, it can't be true because of Noah's Ark, and it can't be true because the world isn't 6,000 years old. And it's like, yeah, but no one really believes those. Like, people, when you believe
that's
in
not
God,
true.
You don't believe in the specifics. Yeah, some people do. Some people are fundamental Christians. When I said no one really believes in those, I believe that to understand Christianity correctly is to understand it through a more spiritualistic, metaphorical sense, and not to examine it as if it's a scientific document.
All of the Christians I've known have been taught, like, when I was in high school, I went to church for a little bit, not because I was religious, but because I wanted to make friends. And they'd always teach that the Bible was, I think it was Anglican church. Okay. And they'd teach that the Bible was true. That everything that was in the Bible was true. The Earth was only 6,000. That's what the pastors and everybody would say, right. And then that's what they'd all repeat, and that's what everybody in the church believed,
and I think that's
they
a
were
very
supposed
silly
to
thing.
believe it.
I think that's why Christianity is in such a horrible place right now, because the two interpretations of Christianity that I see are, like you just described, people who are literalists, which is silly and goes against, in my opinion, the reason that Christianity exists. It's not an explanation for why the world is and how old it is. That's not what it's for, but people will take it that way. Or you have this view of Christianity where it's just loosey-goosey, and you have, like, pastors that are openly lesbian and they don't follow any of the rules, and you know what I mean?
Think about Judaism and in Israel. They actually debate about their own Bible. It's fucking... Yeah, they do. It's amazing.
It seems to me... I keep saying it seems to me. That's my catchphrase. It seems to me that rather than looking at the Bible as if it's making claims about, like, it's making scientific claims, I look at the Bible more like there are rules in it to follow, and that when you follow those rules, life generally becomes better. It's also a product of its time, like, you have to give it that.
Oh, yeah.
So things like homosexuality being a sin, that's the biggest one. That's a product of its time, right? Because if you're, I always relate it to this. If you're a tribe, okay, and we're going all the way back to, like, when they were very small communities, like no real large countries. So if you're a tribe, one of your biggest things is you need to populate. You need to have the bigger population because then you can take over the other tribe or at least defend yourself from them, right? So if you have gay people running around, they're not making babies, that's a problem for your tribe. That's why I'm saying that's a product of its time, because it's an ideal saying, you know, don't be gay because it hurts us in the long run. But it's a product of its time because obviously they wouldn't have understood things that science can tell us, like being gay is actually a biological thing. I've read some things about the gay gene, how it's like genealogical. So things like that. But I think that generally the way that you look at the Bible is these are rules to follow, not statements about the world. Although it's kind of that, but not really.
Yeah. Because a lot of things in the Bible is like a projection of ourself onto our environment. Like, that's the cosmology shit. It's like dome of water around us and shit like that. Like,
yeah.
You know, it's metaphor. All of it's pretty much like you gotta just dig underneath the layer, just scrape away the skin, then you'll finally see, you know, what's really going on.
So, just to not wrap it up, but just to relate everything back to the topic, because we're talking about the future. And so I was saying, I guess where we are now is we're saying, we're talking more about the ideal future than the most likely future. But it seems to be that we're saying no matter what, we definitely need a uniting philosophy amongst all peoples, at least the peoples that we want to succeed, in order to build a good future. Do we all agree on that?
Yeah, we can agree on that.
So, with that being said, I've laid out what I believe. I believe that God, King, and Country are the proper uniting narratives, but is there anything that you guys might believe would be better than those things?
I think we can just do God. I think just God. Just God's enough. I think.
Right.
Not even just the Christian God, just any God. Just God in general. Like, we can even just create our own, like, not like we, but like the collective imagination of humanity. We can just imagine new gods.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. What do you think, Doomer? Like, do you think that there's a uniting narrative that would be better than the ones I've laid out, or do you think we need one at all?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't that we do need one.
You don't think we do?
Yeah, I think that what Mike was saying before about tribalism and stuff, I feel like that's not that bad of a thing, where people can have their own groups of different people thinking, different ways of thinking, different philosophies, and then we can bring them to the table and discuss all of them. The only thing is that like you were saying before, different. If you don't have the uniting, then it can feel like you're being attacked, and it can make debate like your whole society is being attacked, and it can make debate hard. But
so I would actually go against that by saying the ideals of individualism were also born out of England. And the reason I think that was able to work is because if you have a grander uniting narrative that everyone can agree on, from there you can have people kind of separate and believe their individual things go into their group identity. And the way that they come to the table... See, that's the thing. You said that you believe that people should be able to go into their own tribal groups and then come to the table and discuss them, right? what I'm saying is the purpose, like, I agree with that, totally. But the only way you get them to come to the table, what the table is the uniting narrative. Otherwise, they won't talk.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, it is kind of like that. I noticed that with mostly liberals actually won't talk to conservatives, like at all. While conservatives are usually open about discussing their ideas, but liberals will generally only discuss with other liberals.
And I wonder if that's maybe because conservatives are more traditional, and so they have more of an inherent belief in these things, like God. So while a conservative might disagree with you politically, they believe that you're both God's children, and they don't want to kill you. Whereas a liberal, the godless heathens they are, will believe that communism is our God, and anyone who disagrees with it is a heathen. It's kind of like you have a hierarchy of gods, or a hierarchy of things that can take the place of God, with God himself being at the top. And then as you go further down, you find things like so it's hard to do this without a visual aid, but the
thing is, like, ideologies are basically just crippled religions.
Exactly. So I think that if you picture a triangle, right, and at the top of that triangle is God, and then you go down one of the sides of the triangle and make another point and call that communism and draw a triangle under that. That describes what I'm saying, which is that if you believe in God, you believe everyone under God has some sacred, value to them, and you shouldn't just, kill people and that you disagree with because God. Whereas if you believe in communism in place of God, or any ideology, you only believe that the people who subscribe to that ideology have some sacred value to them, and anyone that is outside of that, not so much. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think about what place does democracy hold in the future?
How long have we been recording?
52 minutes.
Oh shit! Oh, this is real long.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we should.
Yeah, we can wrap up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Well, finish. You were just asking.
Yeah, I was just asking. What place you guys think that democracy holds in the future? If it's gonna keep chugging along, or if it's near the end of its lifespan?
It's gonna get smaller.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's near the end of its lifespan, or like in. I think that it will never go away as an idea, and there. I think that democracy is kind of here to stay. Even if we got rid of it, even if we had globalism, what I would hope for would be a globalist democracy. Personally.
And I wonder how that would look and how that would work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you guys want to wrap it up, I won't keep talking. But...
Alright, yeah. So, thanks for watching this episode of the Degenerates Podcast with Boomer, Zoomer, and Doomer.
Next week, we're going to do a book club again.
Oh, shit.
That'll probably be a lot more organized and interesting.
Oh, book club. I forgot. Alright. Thanks for watching.